It is reported the latest Auditor General's report reveals 20 billion cedis was stolen between 2017 and 2019. The latest Africa Confidential report reveals the Tema port is captured, caught in several billions of dollars of corruption by the political elite. JoyNews' latest investigative report reveals how Ghana lost as much as $5 billion of its gold revenue in 2018. An estimated $10 billion of gold shipped out of Ghana between 2014 and 2016 was unaccounted for. Just how do we end this wickedness and criminal loot by those entrusted with power and authority? The criminal loot that impoverishes us so terribly. Let's examine matters arising from Ken Ofori-Atta's 2 days vetting and why Ejapa is his best deal. And of course, how Nana Asante Bediachu unilaterally wrote a letter to cut the budget for Parliament and the judiciary in the name of the president. Really? You're welcome to Newsfile. This is your most authoritative news analysis platform with me, Samson Ladi Anyanini. We'll be right back to deal with the vexed matters. You're welcome back. Here is Samson's take, your legal light. New law. 180,000 and or 15 years jail for land fraudsters and chiefs doing multiple sales. You have heard me celebrate a new law set to bring a great deal of sanity in land management or real property acquisition and related matters in Ghana. You may not have thought about it that, quote, women do 2/3 of the world's work, yet they earn only 1/10 of the world's income and own less than 1% of the world's property. They are among the poorest of the world's poor, unquote. That is a former president of the World Bank Group, Berber Benjamin Conable Jr., monetizing the work women do. Think about it. And respected lawyers championing women's rights, Sheila Minka Premu and Dr. Angela Dwamna-Boaji, told me recently that this sinful state remains true for most women even today. It is no surprise, therefore, that good people are super excited about the new law's mandatory requirement for a spouse to secure the written consent of the other spouse before selling, leasing, mortgaging, exchanging, transferring, giving away as a gift, or engaging in any transaction whatsoever to dispose of interest in land acquired during marriage. The law's presumption is that property acquired during marriage belongs to both couple jointly, unless a contrary intention is expressed in a written agreement. Written agreement. Again, if a spouse, say a man, attempted secretly to register such joint property in his name, which often happens, the Lands Commission will not permit it. That's the new law. Some people are not at all amused about this new regime. But, sorry, we can't help you. The legislator made it and the president assented to it on the 23rd of December 2020. So, it is law and must be obeyed. Now, if you engage in the fraud of selling land that does not belong to you as though it were yours, you commit a crime and you will be forced to pay between 84,000 to 180,000 and or, in addition to that, be thrown into jail for 7 to 15 years. The same sanction in section 277 goes for people who engage in land transaction without authority and those, including chiefs, who are in the fraudulent conduct of selling one piece of land to 2 or more people. But here is my bigger joy. The trainer of lawyers and judges and prolific author of legal texts, Sir Dennis Dominic Ejay of the Court of Appeal, has explained this new law in a new book, To the Understanding of Even the Untrained Mind. I spent Thursday night and much of my Friday discovering law that truly empowers in the 645-page book, Land Law, Practice and Conveyancing in Ghana, 3rd edition. It also teaches us how a historic development dictated by the Land Act 2020, Act 1036, will happen this year. By this law, while the state is not allowed to occupy your land for more than 10 years without acquiring it and paying compensation, the president will receive a report from a management committee of the Lands Commission latest by 23rd June to trigger an executive instrument that will return some lands taken by the state, that's compulsorily, before 1992 to their original owners. That's good news for some people, particularly in this part of the country. That's your legal lights. Get more in Justice Dennis Ejay's book on land law in Ghana. We will take a quick break and return to deal with the vexed matters. And remember, as always, the Newsfile is brought to you by the kindest sponsorship of Bank of Africa, as strong as a group, as close as a partner. MTN, everywhere you go. Ashesi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Duroplast, where Duroplast goes, water flows. Having mosquito spray and coil, pleasant on humans, tough nightmare on insects. And Napa Foods, it is tasty. DBS Industries, that's where you get everything roofing and the best of it. Robert & Sons Limited Optical Services, that's your comprehensive eye care services provider. We'll be right back after this. You're welcome back to Newsfile. This is your most authoritative news analysis platform. And as you know, here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. I get to introduce my guest to you right away, but What is this about gold that we can't account for, that goes through official channels, smuggled through official channels, and the nation is being fleeced in this manner? Take a listen.
A man who has wide knowledge of how national security operates at the airport gives an insight into how the operatives work to compromise the system. He agrees to this interview on condition of anonymity.
Most of the time, the gold that people have been complaining goes always pass through airports without going through the channel, the normal channel. Is through aviation security and other security agencies at the airport, especially aviation security. The ladies, they are mounting the security check at the central screening. So most of the time, the women put it in their bags, their hand luggages. So when they scan and then they see it, will seize the items, then the person will pay money, then they release it to the person to take it out of the country.
Give us a breakdown of how this is done.
They have a middleman at the airport who work it out with the aviation security, those at the central screening. One, let me tell you how Chinese people smuggle gold out of Ghana. They package it in a cigarette packet. They mold it in a four square. Small sizes, like 10 kilo. I don't know how much the weight of the kilos. Then they put it in the middle of the cigarette as a cigarette packet, and then they put cigarettes, and then they seal it, and then they put it in the pack of the cigarette, the carton. Then they will use storybooks. Then they put it on top, and then they solid tape it on it. So when it is in their luggage and they are scanning it, you see the image as a book. But under the back image of the book, you see something that is unidentified. So when they do physical checking and they open them, then you see that it is gold. Then aviation will take money and then they allow them to take it out. And they are making more money than government self at the airport. If Ghana Airport Company and every worker at Ghana Airport is going to work seriously for the state, I'm telling you, Ghana Airport alone, money that they will make there can pay the whole country. But at the end of the day, the money that goes to people's pocket is almost 70% goes to people's pocket than what goes to the government. That is why government is losing more revenue at the airport there.
The managing director of the Ghana Airport Company discounts these claims. According to him, the assumption that established protocols are not observed is false. He adds that there are measures in place to ensure strict adherence to established standard operating procedures. This man we call Willie Brown for the purposes of anonymity is a politically exposed individual. He doesn't only operate illegal small-scale mining concessions, he also has a lot of insight into the networks involved in the smuggling of gold.
Similar to your price.
Okay.
Yes, similar to your price. One sit out and say, what on all the video are. So why should you be your price with the normal question? Yes,
Willie Brown promises to introduce the team to a shipping line that will charge us less than what the state-owned PMMC would take on the gold we intended to export. He talks further about how many gold smugglers beat the system to rob the nation of badly needed revenue.
the court will be alright. It will be around 5 cents more than where you are there. Now they are for market. Now the new man say, oh, so why I can't allow them? And I say, it's everything on the Caribbean.
Willie Brown introduces us to one of the managers of the shipping line who promises us to help us cheat the system. He says the team will have to pay him 8% of the cost on each pound of gold we intend smuggling.
Because now, self is more than what I'm telling you. Because now, at Japan, you know what they brought to Japan. Unless you give me a statement from there where you bought the gold. So the 3% will go to whatever they bought the gold. And that one will be from the whatever I'm going to do it now. The Japan they have started now. So when the gold will ship it out, now they are taking 3% of total volume now.
Okay. Right. So that's just a sneak peek into Kwete Nate's investigative piece, telling you how exactly we have been losing so much gold. And as you may have heard President Akufo-Addo talk about in 2018, gold worth $5 billion was unaccounted for. And as I told you earlier, between 2014 and 16 thereabout, $10 billion worth of gold was unaccounted for. The people who are behaving as if this is, if you listen to the guys at the port, guys at the airport saying, oh, we do everything right, so we are discounting, as if this is a Ghana only problem. You must be reading about the Africa-wide problem and how this is a real issue in Africa where there is mineral resource, too much of it going unaccounted for. All right, let me welcome my guest, Ben Bocce, Executive Director, Africa Center for Energy Policy, ACEP. Ben, thank you very much for joining us. Hello, Ben. You are with us? Yeah.
Thanks for having me, and good morning.
Thank you very much. Also, Dr. Theo Echampong is economist and political risk analyst. Thank you for your time.
Good morning.
Great to have you. We have Seth Emmanuel Tekpe, who is former finance minister, consultant, and executive director of the PFM Tax Africa Network. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you, and good morning to your viewers and listeners.
Good morning. Thank you very much. It's good to know that you are making time to get back into the classroom. We have known that you used to visit and teach at Harvard, and you are back teaching at the University of Ghana Business School, and doing several other, using your knowledge to assist. Thank you very much. In the studio, later we'll be joined by Dr. Kwabena Otu, who is Chief Economist and Director, Labor Research and Policy Institute, Trades Union Congress, TUC. And here in the studio is Dr. Stephen Amwa, MP in Sherso and former CEO, Microfinance and Small Loans Center, Maslock. Thanks for making the time, sir.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me here.
Great. So let's begin with Ben. How does it sound to you when you hear these reports? And I began on a certain note. I've also been reading a certain special report that suggests that people are getting disenchanted, particularly in political leadership across Africa, because things just don't seem to work. If they work only for the elite. So you have our latest Auditor General's report, and the report is that as much as a whopping 20 billion cedis is unaccounted for. Of course, this is not new, it is ritual, so the temptation not to feel anything about it is there. And that's 20 billion within 2017 and 2019. Then the Africa Confidential report I referred to, that tells us about the things that have been happening at the Tema port. You see several billions that, must have gone down the drain as in corrupt activities involving the political elites. They don't mince words about how they go about the report. And then this issue of the gold that goes unaccounted. 2018, $5 billion, and 2014 to 2016, PEAC estimated $10 million. How does it feel? Just a brief, get into your mind.
Yes, thanks, Samson. I think I share the frustration of many Africans when these numbers are thrown, at us, not once, not twice, but persistently. We are faced with the same challenges, and we seem not to have a solution to them. And I think maybe the conversation should be broadened to see how we fix the systemic challenges that we have in our governance architecture. And I think that is what the problem really is. It's not about the gold sector or the oil sector or any other sector. There are problems, systemic problems, that we have to find a solution to. Otherwise, we will be dealing with issues sector by sector as they emerge, but it's a deeper systemic problem that has to do with accountability, institutional efficiency, and we have to find a way to fix these problems. Otherwise, we are not going to have a solution to it. I mean, the gold sector problem, this work that was done by PT really highlighted some of the work we did in 2018. And that was part of a project, a program we're part of, the Ghana Revenue Reforms Program. And we did a report for GRA really to help them understand what is happening in the gold business, particularly the small scale business. And we highlighted the same challenges, how the evasion happened, the key participants in the evasion, and the fact that tax policy was not addressing what was germane or what was most critical in that space. And that is accounting for the gold that is actually produced in Ghana. We don't seem to understand how these numbers play out. We don't know who is producing what, apart from the multinational companies or the big players. The state doesn't have any mechanism to be able to account for gold production in Ghana. So if you implemented a tax policy that targeted the limited amount of gold that was coming to PMMC, you are only going to incentivize further evasion of the legal account. So that was what our work really sought to do, and we were hoping that GRA would pay attention to those numbers that we were throwing at them for them to be much more serious, because it is a very deep-seated problem that you can't just impose tax to be able to achieve results. We saw, some of these international merchants, if you like, who brings in goods to come and sell. And what they do is that they connive with some of the gold buyers who probably are licensed by the state. And they give them the cedis from their proceeds in Ghana, and they use the proceeds to buy gold and give them the dollar offshore. So you're not even able to account for the whole gold trade. And that also makes it difficult for you to account for the trade of these merchants domestically, because they don't ship their currencies, through the banking system, and you're not able to track how much money they are making and how much money they are shipping out for importation of goods and all of that. Beyond that, also institutional defects and problems with the GRA itself, where custom officers were involved in the transit of gold across the borders. You only needed to know which custom officer was at the border at what time. And the syndicate is so organized that they could know which port across the sub-region, whether Togo, Mali, within what specific time they can ship the gold from. So if you are looking to catch them at Kotoka, they are going to Mali for a particular time, depending on which network is available to be used to export the gold. So it was a well-structured mechanism for evading tax and also accounting for the output.
Okay, Ben, we'll get... Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just saying that even where some of the buyers, took tax from the gold producers, there was no system to check whether that tax was actually being accounted for, because the gold producers really didn't bother to take the withholding tax certificate from the gold producers. So a gold buyer may have taken the withholding tax, but the gold producer wouldn't have the capacity to track that because the withholding tax certificates were just not provided. And in some instances, even the gold buyer will ask you, if I'm taking withholding, this is the price I'm offering for the gold. If I'm not, this is the price. And usually the price for not taking withholding was higher. So the incentive really to pay tax was non-existent. So the proposal then was for GRA to really look at mechanisms to track outputs. And once you're able to track output, you can then decide whether it is 0.5%, 0.2%, or 1% that is optimal to sustain the accounting of production. Then policy can be engineered to be able to attract that. If you check the numbers that even the president mentioned, 5 billion, right? If you were able to take 1% from the 5 billion, that is $50 million, for the budget. All right, so we really need to know how much gold is produced, but unfortunately, the incentive to do the hard work. And in fact, that is the biggest part, to do the hard work.
Okay, so Ben,
policy to stop illegality and track production.
Ben, I will return to you. We get into a lot more detail, and then to look at the proposals, because that's most important. We need to get out of this ritual. But in some 30 seconds, tell me, how does it feel, particularly for civil societies like yours? How frustrating is it that you are seeing these thefts all the time and there doesn't seem to be any concrete action to stop it?
It is really frustrating, and especially where you sit at a table, you talk to policymakers about it. Sometimes they understand, the challenges, and they will tell you that, this is something we have to work on, only to go to sleep on them. And we keep working, we keep trying, and we're not getting the results. It gets worried sometimes, but we have to keep trying to see how we can engineer policy the right way. We're not saying we know it all, but if we can engage to ensure that, all outputs can be evaluated and to arrive at a good decision, that will help. We engineer policy within 2-3 days. It is on the way to implementation. Whether it's efficient, we can test it before we go ahead to implement it. We don't do that kind of rigorous work on policy to ensure we can optimize it. So that is the challenge we have to deal with. We will keep trying. I know some people have given up, but those who still want to keep doing it, we can encourage them to persist, to ensure that we can all contribute to helping our countries across the region to really change the trend and improve lives for our people.
All right, thank you very much. Now, Mr. Tokwe, I'll come to you, but I need you to listen to these guys, and then we bring you in because of where you sit and the previous, opportunity that you have had at the highest level in government. Dr. Theo Champong, if you look at it generally from the picture I paint, and that I know, from what I know, is just a small aspect of all of this. It's just a tip of the iceberg, and that the corruption at this level is actually very, very deep. Capital flight from the continent as in Africa to Europe and the Americas, is about 900 billion, while the total of the continents, is less than 300 billion. That's our debt. I'm looking at it from a perspective to get me to feel how we can really resolve our problems. Africa loses in excess of 50 billion to 60 billion annually through illicit financial outflows, according to the report of the high-level panel. The picture I paint with the introduction, from where you sit, what's your response to it? Or you have become, numb to it?
Interesting question you ask. No, I haven't become numb to it, but it also kind of shows you the realities that we're dealing with. So just like Ben, I have also been involved in doing a lot of work in this sector, and you'll be shocked at some of the things that you find. So clearly, yes, there's the illicit financial flows. We've got transfer pricing issues. But what Kwete's documentary actually demonstrates is that we have very deeply entrenched criminal syndicates. We have cartels that are moving or conducting these activities with the active connivance of several stateside actors, right? So if you watch the video and some of the work we've been doing on the sidelines, it is very clear that you cannot move these goods, you cannot move gold, you even cannot smuggle certain, like rosewood, another example.
Yeah.
You cannot move it out of the system without having people involved in the value chain, but particularly on the state side of things. And it demonstrates or tells me that we do have a big systemic problem or an issue, and there are very serious cracks within the accountability measures that we've got in country, as well as the fact that, of course, a lot of the enforcement agencies are not particularly well equipped sometimes to even pick up on some of these activities. There is an index that actually tracks organized crime and criminality in Africa. It's called the Enact Africa Organized Crime Index. Ghana is ranked 26th out of 54 countries. And then in West Africa, it is actually ranked number 10 out of 15 for criminality, right? And when you dig into it, what you see is that there are several pervasive markets. So here, I'm talking about human trafficking and smuggling, arms trafficking, illegal drugs trade, and most recently, things to do with non-renewable resource crime. So this is where your galamsey and rosewood and all those exports go into. But it shows that, look, there are three things. The borders we have are very porous. Ben gave you a classic example of you go and chase them in Kotaka today and tomorrow they are in Mali. But beyond that, there's a lot of insider manipulation. There are people within the system that are gaming it for their own advantage, and that is like entrenching corruption as well. So where you look at all of our entry ports in Ghana, from Tema to Accra and a few of the other places, the issues, whether it is gold or galamsey or illegal drug smuggling, they come back to the same set of causal factors. The question then is, how do we address it? I think there are some solutions and we can come to that, but at the core is the political economy. At the core is how we incentivize people. And if we don't address the insider manipulation bit, the involvement of the stateside actors, unfortunately, we are just chasing or would be chasing around the bush on this. The illicit financial flows is a big deal. And if you do a lot of the work in this together with like the transfer pricing, but I just want to focus on illicit financial flow. You see a connection between that and even the funding of political party activity all across Ghana and in Africa at large. So in one breath, what these syndicates, cartels are doing is buying the stateside actors and at the same time supporting the political activities in the country through various illegal means. And that even makes the problem or addressing the problem a bit more difficult or deeply entrenched.
You mentioned, political party activity and party financing. And in recent times, I've been reading Justice Apau's report, the Sole Commissioner's report. And I come to appreciate why the report takes time to isolate party financing, campaign financing, as one of the ways to cure the humongous judgment debts that we have had to face as a country, where judgment debts have become one other way through which the political elite steal our money. They cook it in the name of a judgment debt. Now, the reason you mentioned that, and that interests me, is that we don't talk about it in this country, but we don't ask the question, how much goes into a particular campaign for a particular election year? We are told that as much as $100 million to up to $1 billion is spent on party political campaigning here in Ghana by one party. And the least you may have encountered in this country, in this Fourth Republic, would have been $400 million spent by one political party. Can we really stop this thing? This big corruption, can we stop it?
Not until you reform the way you raise money and finance party activity. That's, like, for me, one of the big things that we've got to address, because everything comes in a full cycle. In all the reports that I've seen, some of the work Ben has done, probably some of the work that Honorable Tekpe has done. But if you look at work that other researchers in this area, like Professor Kwesi Enin of KIPCT have done, the conclusions and the findings are clear in my mind that the monies not only do not fund, right? So there are several layers to this. There are those in the food chain that are like middlemen, but there are people at the top that make sure that things happen. And when you dig further, you begin to see that often some of the monies finds their way to finance campaign related activity. And so if we don't address that elephant in the room, which we all pretend isn't happening, then it's unfortunate, but I don't think that we're actually going to resolve or deal with this problem.
Yes, and our electoral commissions have rendered themselves into just, organizing event of an election every 4 years, when we have a very formidable law that empowers them to check how parties are funded and to have audited accounts submitted. And for failure to do so, the sanctions are so onerous. And there is no record in this country of our electoral commission doing any of that, not even after a group of guys have gone to court to get the court to compel the electoral commission to ensure that, these audited accounts, how they get their funding and all of these things are published. Will we get there?
I am not sure. That to be just the simple answer I have to give to you.
Okay, so you hold on, we'll come there. Now, Steve, before I get to Sir Tekpe, the two of you politicians, so from where you sit, how does it feel hearing these stories? When President Akufo-Addo says $5 billion cannot be accounted for through our gold, export for 2018. What do you think he ought to be doing after telling us that?
Okay, thank you very much. My regards to our viewers this very morning. I think first thing is the acknowledgement of the problem and the acceptance of the fact that this is a problem which is quite systemic. And for the leader to allude to that fact, I think we need to tap him on the shoulder that you've done well. Other leaders, not precisely opposition leader in Ghana, but in general, would have hidden that. So in the first place, for the president to be that truthful, I think he's done well. But it's just a tip of the iceberg. It's just a tip of the cake or the ice of the cake or whatever. They use that is a phrase or whatever expression. But your ensuing question is the most important thing. What are we doing about all this after the revelation? Samson, I think this issue has to be given even bigger dimension that we are doing. And to me, it's only one aspect of the leakages in terms of state resources in Africa, not just under this regime or the previous, but it's been there. So we need to have very comprehensive approach towards it. Before I just go on, you heard our minister in charge of lands and forestry, Honorable Abujapo, saying that government will take steps to deal with this situation. We should also talk to Ghanaians to be more patriotic, because this is something done by a syndicate. Those in government, outside government, security agencies, the citizenry, all of us. And also we need to also standardize the taxation policies at the neighboring countries, the borders, because if it's less, definitely they'll be pushed to be doing all these things. But coming back to what the president is supposed to do, I suggest that we should sit down to review and redefine the critical activity path of these commodities, right from the inbound to the outbound, and also be able to identify the key stakeholder individuals and the groups or organizations, and also define specific segment policies, because this is a serious issue. It's only this thing that we are looking at. If from the Gulf, their trade accounts tells them that they have imported 7 billion worth from Ghana, and from our trade account, we have 2 billion, confirming what the president is saying. Something, it is extremely huge. But me, I'm not surprised.
Not a different story when it came to the roast food issue, right? Exactly.
But I'm not surprised simply because we are going through a lot of these things. And I think it accounts for the reason we are so much endowed with a lot of raw materials, natural resources. We are so rich as a continent, but we are very poor. On the global league table, we are at the bottom as a continent. But in terms of natural resources and raw materials, we are on top. And this is what I count for. I think as a country, first, we need to have properly defined what I would term as budget control policy framework that would take care of all this, because the leakages happen not only in the revenue aspect, but even expenditure. We are not looking there. This is very huge. I think one day we should have a whole day discussing it, because this is the revenue aspect where we are talking about royalties. What about taxes at the port? What happens? What about even those compensations? Government pay them every day. They don't go to work. And I mean, woe betide anyone. You're a CEO or whatever, you want to talk about it, they will tell the story and maybe you'll be even hated. So we are losing so much as a country. So much that this issue is good the president has accepted. But for a president to come out and accept this and know this is happening in our country, not only today, it means he's ready to do something about it. And just as the minister promised, I can assure you, we will do something about it as a government. But then,
let me tell you this.
Okay.
People are tired of the promises. They are not interested in promises. They want to see action. Now, you just spoke about we are poor. Africa, we are poor. And I tried to give you a certain example of how illicit financial inflows to the Europe and Americas accounts for about 900 billion, a whopping 900 billion. Yet the entire continent, our debt, is less than 300 billion. And here we sit, crying we are saddled with debt and going cap in hand. And yet the mineral resource and the thievery from the top, there's not some guy in a village stealing a goat and having to rot in jail. That's what we're talking about. So people want action. If you are coming to announce something, you must have done something before you tell us. You don't think so?
Oh, but I agree. Something is being done. Government is working on it. But of course, the medium or the opportunity, the time frame.
Government is working on it. Government is working on it. It's hackneyed. It's a cliche that people don't want to hear anymore.
But respectfully, if we also always limit these problems to heads, we are in trouble, because this is a whole syndicate staff, right? Even from the bottom.
The leadership, you understand? It's everything.
Yeah, leadership is not only His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, His Excellency former President Mahama. Here, this table, why everybody's talking about Newsfile in Ghana? Because of you. If you don't take care one day, we change you, somebody may do better or worse. So the leadership that we are talking about, leadership at the port, leadership even in the village, leadership at various desks. That's why I'm saying that the critical activity path of this whole issue should be well reviewed, because there are segments inbound, what comes in, the operations aspect, what are the policies there, who are in charge, the outbound, where does it go, who is in charge, even at the port, at the harbor, even the center where government is, who is in charge. All of us as a country, not until we begin to reset or redefine our mindset and the corporate focus of this country, I am telling you, we'll cry, and Nana Addo will come and go, maybe Dr. Bawumia will come and go, maybe another person will come and go, NDC may come and go, and even Jesus Christ will come and go. The problem will be there. So I appreciate what you're saying. We, as those in government, the president or whoever is in charge, must lead the definition of the new thing that we are looking for. That one I agree with you. And must also ensure, not just talking, but the people involved, the stakeholder individuals, the stakeholder groups, I mean those who are in charge of specific activities and have the tenacity and the leverage to control these things, must also be and doing. I don't know if what I'm saying is making clear to you.
I'm going to set up right now, but listen, and I ask the question.
Sure.
Yes, you say we should applaud the president for acknowledging it.
Sure.
When did he acknowledge it? 2018. And now remember that what we are talking about today, it's only to the UEA. We are not talking about India, where it's a lot. We are not talking about Switzerland. So if you brought all these together, that's why I say this is only a tip of the iceberg.
I agree. But you know, it's a systemic thing.
You said so.
Age.
I actually wrote it down. You said
between
this is
2014 and 2016.
So the president acknowledged
2014 and 2018.
No, but he acknowledged it in 2018, and you say this is systemic. No. And today you are telling me that the minister for lands
and forestry, Honorable Jinapo,
has assured that he will do something about it.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that in the first place, if we limit this thing to this regime, let's all be honest. I was reading other pieces of information, even sent to me by your desk, that between 2014 and 2016, we lost huge amount of money.
I have mentioned that here so many times.
Exactly. So what I'm saying is,
we lost an estimated 10 billion.
Thank you.
You're a politician. Give me an idea. What will 10 billion do to the road sector, to the education sector?
Huge. I read an extra that says that we could have done dual carriage of about 500 kilometers. That is between Greater Accra and Kumasi, between Greater Accra and Central Region, between Greater Accra and Volta Region. You could have dualized our roads. Accidents will be reduced, businesses will be enhanced, will increase our productivity, our GDP would have grown. Outside that, we could have done about 400 chip compounds. Yeah. The health sector would have been improved. It will do so much. Right. But some say...
So guess what? I'm familiar with this because JoyNews that did the story decided to give a picture to the world so that people can appreciate what we are talking about. How much does it cost us to fund free SHS?
I really don't have the figure in my head now. I don't want to guess anything wrong.
Okay.
But I don't think it will be more than the amount that we are losing.
Any close.
Any close, yeah. So we could have done a lot. But what I'm saying is that...
So you hold on for me. Let me come. Honorable Setepe, are you with us?
Yes. Can you hear me, please?
Okay. Let me hear you. I have no questioning for you. After listening to the three of them, let me hear you.
Thank you very much. And let me try and be as specific as possible. The problem we are talking about actually compounds two problems in revenue administration. The first is transfer pricing, which these same institutions, multinationals and others have engaged in and affects the same real sector that we are talking about. You know, whether you're talking timber, you're talking gold, you're talking petroleum. You know, transfer pricing is a huge, issue. And before you say, what did we do? Yes, we did a transfer pricing regulations, and training for GRA to tackle transfer pricing. Now, the second area where this is a major issue is that, or reinforces a major issue, is over-invoicing, under-invoicing, which customs has always. And what this does actually is that it serves as a conduit by these smugglers, to, and even regular exporters, when they under-invoice, they deprive the nation of vital foreign exchange. Because what they do is that they under-invoice the value, even where they do declarations, where they do valid declarations, where they may declare gold they are taking out and whatever, but they end up with showing lower values, to customs for the export. And so these are the conventional areas where, besides smuggling, where customs has been focusing. I teach a course which now overlaps this with, and I think both Ben and Doc have mentioned. That is the whole area of illicit financial flows and money laundering. And this is very important because Ghana has come under the watch list of the money laundering and if you remember recently, but there was one that occurred when I was a deputy, and that's how I got involved, with this. And if you recall, it led to a raft of laws, being implemented at the time in conjunction with my colleague Anatete, going to Parliament. The key one being the beneficial ownership, laws, which were included in the Income Tax Act. Subsequent to that, between the time of between 2013 and 2016, before we left office, one of the measures we did, one of the problems we have is that our economy is changing. And we'll come to this same point when we discuss, revenue strategy. Our economy is changing very fast. Because our tax laws, our customs law was an 85 law amended, variously. Income tax was 2000, VAT was 1998. There was no excise law. You recall that we did, with the cooperation of the minority at the time, and Honorable Akutu and Chairman Sambuso, together with the current speaker, we revamped all the tax laws. We revamped all of them to recognize that Ghana is no longer an agrarian economy. We are the financial sector, we have petroleum, we have others. These are some of the concrete. And then we formulated the Revenue Administration Act and GRA itself, and the integration, and segmentation that was done, which should have led to particularly strengthening the large taxpayer unit. Most of the problems we're talking about are problems of the large taxpayer unit. Training, qualification, that is on the revenue side. These are important because, and the course I teach, draws attention of revenue officers. The other person who teaches it, by the way, is Adi Nachia, and another colleague, former colleague, of GRA. It says that customs and GRA in general should not look at the conventional way of managing our enterprise. And here, this is where the issue of coordination comes in. Because smuggling is not tied in, as we are, with big, money laundering issues, which you mentioned, illicit financial flows, involving huge amounts of money smuggling. And by the way, we are not talking about just gold or the rest, which everybody assesses can be exported. It involves drugs and others. And this is where the money laundering comes from the word laundry. You take your dirty clothes, it comes out and it's clean, And having been on the watch, and we are just getting out of it, and I heard the minister designate mentioned that FATA, FAST was about to have issued various reports which might take us off that watch. It is a pain for business, especially formal businesses. That's another dimension. Because then their transfers are watched, they are placed under various, constraints, So it's not just a revenue loss issue. It's something which, if we want to be a gateway, if we want to be what we want to do, making income and viable, we need to tackle this issue. And these are some of the concrete steps. Two, the coordination involves the Financial Intelligence Center, which I used to work with, and I believe that is where, because you can see from what I'm saying that Bank of Ghana, is involved. The ports and harbors are involved. Customs is involved. And therefore, this is where, we must, widen, and through either the FIC or some coordination body, which was the recommendation that was going from our work on the laws and things to cabinet. Should that effective coordination is required. But coming to, the customs and tax area in particular, as I mentioned, the large taxpayer unit was established, purposely, to gain expertise in this and in areas of tax audit and others which are in the report which I have also reviewed. These are some specific measures, and I'm aware that the Ministry of Finance continues to work on these, areas. Probably we need to, get civil society to contribute, to appreciate, the work that is being done and to make a contribution. The other dimension, work that had been done through the BEPS, base erosion and profit sharing, which the advanced countries put in place, because they are also facing these issues. It's information exchange. And this is where we must be careful what double taxation agreements we sign. Because what is the economic benefit of signing, a double taxation agreement, with countries which I don't want to be specific, don't have, any economic activity in Ghana, at all. Sometimes these are normally tax havens also. And this is why for me, tax haven is not just an Ajapa issue, but tax haven is a big problem for tax administration for a very long time, because it's tax havens that are used, so again, through the transfer pricing and our involvement in the UN Committee of Experts, which Professor Mills of pleasant memory is well known. In fact, he's acknowledged to be one of the people who strengthened it, and which are happening to ourselves on, together with the OECD. I think the guidelines for double taxation agreements must be, watched carefully. And some of the agreements we have been signing, lately are agreements which honestly, may be compounding some of these problems that we have. And I think we need to scrutinize not just the fact that, we are set where we know specifically that, they do not have a significant or permanent, operations and residence, their businesses, and we go into this. Right. So these are, areas where, both the international community, which is concerned, the important thing is that the advanced countries themselves are reading from some of these things, and therefore they are willing to cooperate. Institutions like the IMF, World Bank, and other major international organizations have been helping, and we should exploit. Let me end on this segment by saying that I think we need to implement the revenue modernization program for GRE. That is what comes out for me when I read the ISEF report. I see that there's some misunderstanding about why the segmentation, why a large taxpayer office, why a medium taxpayer office, and why a small taxpayer office. There are, and we can discuss this later on. But you see, when you integrate when you integrate the VAT service with the former IRS, you have people who have worked on only income tax for a very long time, and you have people who have worked on only VAT for a very long time. So the next phase, which was to be in the revenue modernization phase 2, just like the gift miss, phase 2, was to offer training. For example, the tax offices in the places where we have small scale mining and others, it's not necessary to check the activity. There are many of them who genuinely want assistance. They want to do the business genuinely, clearly and whatever. So that phase was to train the officers who are the tax officers that are on the ground. The large taxpayer unit will deal with multinationals and the rest, but the training and the IT systems, which was noted, yes, is a major thing. And this is where the GRA IT system actually was piggybacked on the e-government project very early, around 2009, 2010. The GRA needs to have now, under the revenue modernization phase 2, its own robust, robust information exchange. I tell you, if the absence of that, extending the national identification number to everybody would not necessarily resolve the issue, because if you don't use it to gather information, data, right? So I think that is the next move. And the first integration should be with customers.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Tekwe, information can be exchanged even within GRA.
Mr. Tekwe, thank you very much. We have spent time talking about the problems, and a couple of you, or almost all of you, have also chipped in what solutions should be. Now, I want us to focus on the solutions, and I'm coming to all of you once again to tell us what the way forward, the solutions should be, so that we don't return here in the next 5 months, 1 year, hear the same sounds and problems being, repeated. This is just 2 journalists sent out of multimedia, go check on this, and they bring us, this is not anecdotal, evidence of how the money is lost. And some of you are in a position to know how exactly this money is lost. So first, Mr. Tekwe, you've given us a number of solutions. I had asked a few earlier.
Yes.
It does appear that, bottom line, a major aspect of this is money that the political parties need to finance their campaigns. The Political Parties Act 2000, Act 574, mandates the parties to file their returns and accounts, indicating with the Electoral Commission within 6 months from the 31st of December of each year. They should state the state of their accounts, the sources of funds, paid membership dues, audited accounts, among others. This can be the starting point. Do you know why the Electoral Commission has organized elections, is gone to sleep, and won't hear about them again until 2024 or 25?
Unfortunately, I'm not an electoral commissioner, and I think that we shouldn't be coming to the point where we look outside the Electoral Commission for answers. And I know what I'm alluding to. I think it's important that we as an Electoral Commission, some of these questions, why they are not done, because it's in the law. But having said that, compliance is a major issue. In fact, if you read the SF report and the rest, and as a tax administrator, compliance is a major headache. For example, they speak about taking recalcitrant taxpayers to courts and imposing penalties. And so I think it's generally an issue of compliance. And maybe the forces, just like in business, that make sure these things don't happen. And this is where I agree with you that maybe a political class needs to. These things are done in many countries. We are not the only ones who, hold elections. And I believe that, once we have the law, it's down to enforcement. And the institution should be asked to account for why these things are not done.
Okay. Dr. Theo Champong, Mr. Tekwe talks about 2 main problems: transfer pricing, over-invoicing, and under-invoicing. on the top of my head, without much knowledge within the financial issues, how is this done without official complicity in what we see? And over invoicing, under invoicing, is it a case of incompetent officials who we have put at these places who are supposed to ensure that this doesn't happen and is going on?
No, actually, it isn't. On the latter point of the officials being incompetent, sometimes they actually are competent, but they do overlook things. So, I mean, I know of cases, for example, at the port where you have a big problem with bulk cargo that comes in, where like the way bridges are not working, and the scanning regime doesn't, really tend to pick up some of the things that are coming in. So anybody could be hiding weapons or arms or be hiding drugs in there, and you never really know. So sometimes the officials, yes, are educated or understand the issues, but other times they just don't have the tools that allows them to really pick things up. In other instances, you tend to see that the declaration, and this is like a classic example where, if you look like at rice imports, for argument's sake, the declarations as you have and the volumes, when you corroborate that with other statistical agencies, so like the UN Comtrade Stats, you see a big disparity between rice that we claim to have been imported into Ghana and what these other international agencies are reporting as rice that has been exported from various jurisdictions into Ghana. The point then comes to what Honorable Tekpe was saying about the institutional coordination going forward. I think it's absolutely vital, but it needs to go beyond just the GRAs and the EOCOs and the Financial Intelligence Center. I think to also rope in other stakeholders. So a lot of us within the civil society space have done quite a lot of work in this tax or taxation issues, like on transfer pricing, and we are happy to provide some solutions as well. I think we need also to focus on the borders and the entry points. That's a question of investment, the surveillance system, the technologies that will allow us to detect some of these challenges. And going forward, there's the big question really about taxation of the digital economy and how things are changing as a result. In fact, Minister Tekpe and I think 2 or 3 years ago, if you remember, we were at an ITIC event forum in London, where this was like a big issue. And there were very useful suggestions coming out of that. And one of which I think is the whole issue about the revenue inflows and outflows in 2 or 3 key sectors. So for example, in telecoms, where traditionally we have seen some of these transfer pricing issues, and we need to double up on the auditing requirement in the petroleum sector that I work. There are so many issues there, some of which I cannot speak about on national TV. But, this broader working group that involves the stateside actors, but other, stakeholders, I think we would find some of the solutions to it. In fact, the thing is that most of the solutions are there. They just need to be coordinated. But we are happy to support that going forward.
So if you permit me just 5 seconds, so that our audience would understand very simple terms, so we are discussing now. So I go to customs and I want to export 100 times 10, quantity and 10 price. So I should be declaring 1,000, which is what I'll be expected then to repatriate, under the financial laws of the country. So what do? With the connivance, as Stu just said, I may declare 1,000, I may even declare it as 800. Or if I declare 1,000, then I reduce the 10 to 8, and therefore the nation is short of 200. If I reduce both the quantity and the price, the nation even loses more. So the invoice, the value on the invoice is being underpriced, and that's where under invoicing. And then it happens the reverse, where over invoicing, I may just also over invoice just as a means of taking money out. So if my focus is to take money out illegally, I may declare that I'm the value I'm taking out is maybe a certain value which is not, and then I go to Bank of Ghana, and that is what I am allowed to take, out of the country after the repatriation based on money which I may have brought in through other illicit means. This is where the connection is. So you now see I may have engaged in, say, smuggling or some other activity, and I want to launder the money, so I go into gold and I want to export, and in that case it's over invoicing. So instead of, and my partner is there, so instead of 10, I declare 15 or 20, and I take more of the money which I'm holding, out because I have the permission to take it out.
Right.
So just to explain, I hope it's
Thank you. And that was very good, an intervention. That's your teacher skills at play at its best. Now, so Theo, I was asking secondly that, so we are looking to resolve the problems, and we are talking about transfer pricing, that over invoicing, under invoicing, and I asked the question, there certainly will be official complicity. If it is not a question of official complicity, there certainly is a case that we have incompetent people, officials that we have put in charge of the ports and at the GRA to ensure that these things work. If this is admitted, then why have we not done anything in this area to resolve it?
Yeah, sometimes I think the appetite for reform often also isn't there. So I have been involved in talking to people at various channels within the food chain, and they will tell you clearly, look, we want things to be done right, but if you're scanning a cargo or a good, and somebody at the top is telling you to let this container pass through because the person probably clearing it is a politically exposed person or has somebody closer at the top. The reality is that, look, you want to safeguard your job, so that middle-level officer or low-level officer will let it, slide through.
Yeah,
so
interestingly, as you make that statement, Ben and Seth are laughing. Yeah, they're amused.
No, but that's the reality. This is the problem that we keep skirting around. We are talking some of the big language, which is good in terms of the reform high level, but we need to translate that also to the low level, and fix the issues along the value chain, because you realize that it is not always that low level official who is involved in the criminality or involved in taking 500 Ghana cedi to allow some goods to pass through.
Yeah.
There are people further up the food chain that are allowing this to happen. And if we don't fix that, we only deal with one part of the problem, but it festers and it breeds a lot of corruption.
Right. I'm going to bring on somebody briefly, but Ben, let's hear. You spoke about tracking the outputs. How effective is that? And Mr. Setekwe also mentioned implementation of the revenue modernization report. He talks about phase 2 and the gift mix. Is it phase 2 also?
Yes, Samson, I realize that you are frozen by the numbers, that we are losing as a continent. And frankly, this is just what we know. What we do not know, maybe far more than this. So, and often the approach has been that it is the companies, the multinationals, that are actually cheating the state. But you've asked the question, who or which company is not doing the same? Which Ghanaian company, which Nigerian company is not exploiting weaknesses in tax administration to cheat the state? So I think we have to go beyond pointing fingers to really look at the role of the state in fixing the problem. And if we're able to do that, we'll be making some progress. And that requires tough decisions. It requires leadership and very painful actions that may limit the benefits with politics. And that is where it becomes very difficult. How do you deal with a chief that is involved in illegal small-scale mining and aiding the evasion of the numbers so that the state doesn't see? How do you deal with a minister who may be caught in the midst of this problem? How do you deal with a high-level officer who may also have data on a politician and therefore cannot be attached in some of these circumstances? So we need to really have a conversation about improving institutional efficiency and independence to allow these institutions to function and work. And I've been saying that the role of the tax administrator should be to collect money and give to the finance minister or government to be able to deliver on this work. It is not a continuous engagement back and forth with the state. We should be able to separate that function so that the minister calls for the numbers, he calls for the revenue, and not really, as Theo would say, a call to let some container pass. And some of the things we know, we can't discuss them here because you will be engineering social change if you want to put out some of those information. But the reality is that we don't have the energy to do what is right. And that is also engineered by complicity in these issues. So we need to allow these institutions to really work independently for us to be able to deal with the problem. The state is the one that is supposed to engineer strategy to account for what is produced. The state is the one with the power to engineer capacity to track what a company produces. All right? If you fail at that, don't point at the company to say that they are evading tax, because their utmost responsibility is to the shareholder. And whatever they have to do to improve on the shareholder value, we have learned this. Honorable Tepe has taught this many, many times, right, in the classroom, that they have the ultimate responsibility to improve their shareholder value. And all of these schemes under declaration and all of that ensures that they improve on shareholder value, and that will continue, whether it's a multinational or a Ghanaian company. But the state has to do its role in ensuring that it has systems and the institutions to really act and bite.
Right, and the CDD's Dr. Kojo Asante says there is a core problem about values and accountability. There's a core problem about values and accountability. He says we can do all the coordination we want. If the motivation and opportunities for corruption remains because there is certainty that there will be no sanctions, then they will coordinate to continue the corruption. They will coordinate to continue the corruption. I've heard, for example, somebody suggest that we have this president preaching, I'm not sure he's left the ball on it, preaching Ghana beyond aid. And somebody says, for example, if you want to walk the talk on Ghana beyond aid, this is how to go about it. And indulge me, let me read this brief part of a report done on the back of the death of Magufuli. And this is Raila Odinga talking. He says, when Dr. Magufuli declared his interest in the Chama Cha Mapinduzi ticket for the presidency in 2015, well, you may remember Magufuli for all the wrong things, but there's a lot he has also done right. even when those who were supposed to give him aid, support him with money, decided to turn their backs on him, he used internal money to do a few of the things and did them right. He says, I took keen interest because his contest was my contest, just as mine had been his. We got deeply involved and we were excited when he won. He invited me to Dar almost immediately after his inauguration. During that visit, the newly elected president was frank. He said he had known how to run ministries. Now he needed advice on how to run a government. He particularly wanted to know how we managed our NAC and the Grand Coalition government to raise revenues to deliver services and stop corruption. I advised my friend that, for a start, he should look no further than the revenue and procurement officers at all levels of government. I told him that in most cases, those officers were the ones driving latest car modules, building classic apartments in cities and putting up castles in rural areas despite lower salaries. He needed to subject them to lifestyle audit, retire or even jail the incorrigibly corrupt, and transfer others. Then revenue collection would shoot up. Here's the last part of it. He said he listened. That's Magafuli. He listened to Raila Odinga. In some cases, he personally walked into offices to see how work was being done. Soon, Tanzania's revenue doubled, then tripled. The new president suddenly had money to build roads, ports, hospitals, and railways without relying on donors. Ben, your brief comment on this, then we continue.
No, I think those are some of the good things that Magafuli really introduced in Tanzania. Except that, even when you have good intentions, you are working in an ecosystem and you need to be able to test your ideas so that they become sustainable. You can shape those ideas for them to work over the long haul. And some of the failings really was that adjustment to ensure that you don't inject too much pressure on the system, that you raise revenue in the short term, but in the long term, you would collapse the entire system. And I mean, Theo was talking about the issues at the port. Our estimate is that about 70% of the revenues are not even coming to the state. If you are tempted to collect that 70% tomorrow, you may introduce a huge shock into the economy. You need to really strategize how you implement that to be effective and not inject, some significant shock into the entire economy. So, all right, good thing, good ideas, but how we implement them to ensure that we don't unnecessarily shock the economy, the system.
So I ask you that because you said the job of those people is simply to collect the money and get it to the finance minister so that things will work. Now, before Stephen has the last say on this, I'm joined by Henry Osei. He's Director of Research, Chamber of Billion Traders, Ghana. The membership is made up of small-scale miners, local licensed gold buying agents, and companies, licensed gold exporting companies, service providers in the small-scale mining sector. Henry, thank you very much for joining us on Newsfile. Henry, please unmute.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Yes, let's hear your intervention. Yes, let's hear your intervention quickly.
Yeah, I think we need to look at this thing very critically based on its international repercussions. First and foremost, what Ghanaians need to know is that Switzerland in particular and Europe in general, since 2013, there has been a ban on the export of small-scale gold from Ghana and most African countries since 2013. Apart from the large-scale producing companies who are able to export to Switzerland, on the small-scale sector, there has never been any export since 2013. When we were served with letters, even the Mineral Commission has been very much aware of this. They took the pains to come in to help us in streamlining the small-scale sector in terms of the child labor issues which were raised, and for which reason we were banned. And unfortunately, the Minerals Commission were not able to meet them when we arranged for the Swiss to come in. So Dubai being the other alternative, most companies decided to export gold from Ghana to Dubai. And for our information, prior to the ban, there were about 4 or 5 companies which could only export gold to Switzerland, including PMMs, 4 or 5 companies which could only export gold to Switzerland. So for the figure of 7 billion that is being raised, I find it very, very, very difficult to understand where they are getting those figures.
Those are official figures. Those are official figures.
We need to really write to the Swiss Customs for that kind of information, so that we'll be able to, because for data, you really need to get the source. And it's not a matter of just throwing about any figure.
If you don't have the contrary figures, if you don't have, Hello, Henry. If you don't have the contrary figures, we go by those official figures, and it is very easy for somebody like me. It's very easy for somebody like me to believe those figures, because I know. And there are several other situations like that where minerals that are extracted, particularly from African countries, the countries report lower numbers. And then the countries to which they export give us the receipts that show that they have actually taken delivery of higher numbers. So this is not new.
It is not new, but you can also, KLM, that is the only airline which was handling bullion to Switzerland. So it's easy for you to also do some verification from their end. But there has not been any, for the past 7 years, there has not been any export of gold from Ghana to Switzerland. That is what we need to get clear. On the issue of Dubai.
We are not talking about Switzerland. Right now we are talking about the UAE.
On the issue of UAE, yes. For 5 billion, we need to look at the small-scale production in itself. And those figures must come from the Minerals Commission, because they are the body that is doing the monitoring and evaluation of the small-scale sector.
But now we can't trust them.
It results monthly returns from the small-scale sector. So we need to look at that critically. Another source is the PMC, which has been handling all exports from Ghana for some years now. Then the custom, the GCN, which is now the Unipass. Every export, you're supposed to do your bill of entry. And those documents are the documents that are attached to the export, which gets to the Dubai Customs. Dubai Customs is very much aware of the custom procedures here. So for gold in particular, what we don't know is gold, whether it's gold or cash, which we do export from Ghana. The banks do export gold, cash from Ghana. Gold is also exported. They go into one pallet. And for security reasons, I will not disclose how they are marked. And when it gets to a destination, the customs over there are very much aware of what to look out for.
Well, Henry, you are saying, bottom line, you are saying that this smuggling, illicit business is not going on?
The smuggling, we as a chamber, I think last year, if you are aware, there were 2 arrests, one at the border and one at the airport. And it was based on the fact that we are, as a chamber, have been coordinating with the national security. Because as we're talking now, we realized that our figures were coming down drastically. We budgeted an estimated figure of 200 million Ghana cedis in withholding taxes to the government from 19th May 2020 to December 2020. We fell short, and our figure came to around 156 million Ghana cedis in withholding taxes. Looking at it, our exports have trended drastically to about 100 kilos on a monthly basis. But we know what is happening in our sister countries. Mali's export on the weekly basis has gone up to 4 tons, which is being recorded in Dubai. Cote d'Ivoire has also gone up, and it's just like the cocoa industry. We have a higher tax regime on the gold. Cote d'Ivoire, people are paying 0.5% to government in tax.
Okay, so my very last question to you, my final question, my final question to you, Henry. 1%. Hello, Henry. My final question to you, and if you can answer that in some 30 seconds, why do you suspect, and why would a country that is receiving something report higher numbers than what you claim you exported? What would be the motivation to do that?
The motivation is on the higher tax, the 3%. You are even now on the grounds, you even see Burkina based in the upper regions of Ghana buying gold and moving it into their countries. And that is a problem that we are facing. The borders are the major problem.
I don't think you understand. I don't think you understood my question. I don't think you understood my question. I am buying something from you, and I'm telling the world that I bought 20 pieces from you. You have reported to your boss that you only sold 10 pieces to me. What would be my motivation for telling your boss that you sold 20 to me instead of the 10 you claim?
Oh, the motivation will be basically on greed. It's just to avoid paying taxes or whatever.
I don't think you get me. I don't think you get me. Okay, sorry, we can end the interview here. Thank you very much. So let's have Steve finish up. You said this is systematic and it needs to be tackled, more seriously. So conclude on your solutions.
Samson, I think almost everyone that spoke on this issue, probably they broke it down what I initially tried to propose. Now the problem is there. We are all talking about it. What is the solution, which you fantastically stated? I think we should sit down, critically design the critical activity path or the value chain, understand each segment of the flow, and make sure that what are the key performance indicators at each segment, and who are the critical players, the key stakeholders, and what are the needed policies and the laws that are to be enforced. Because it involves a lot of people along the stratification. What do we do about them? It's been going on for ages. You ask a very good question, that tax officials, what did they do? And you were asking whether they were complacent or they were incompetent. It could be. But then, have you also asked yourself that whether probably they could have also been involving themselves? They could have been part of the syndicate. It's also possible because exercises such as
that's what I meant by complicit.
Complicit. Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you said
complacent.
Sorry. Thank you very much. Then you're on spot. So these things are there. But before we can handle them very well, we ourselves as a people should stop undermining nation building. Because we do these things to ourselves. We tend to be members of this same cycle and we suffer. The next generation will suffer, posterity will suffer. So I am saying that we should look at the tactical and the strategic framework in terms of models that will solve this problem. One, let us sit down and review the entire activity. What happens from beginning to the end? And each of the points, what are the key indicators can we track? And make sure that if there are lapses, we fix them. And make sure that those who are involved, what are we placing on them in terms of competence, in terms of training, and in terms of even having the needed certification, and make sure that we can solve these problems. Other than that, without this tactical and strategic management model or framework, which we ourselves, especially the authority, will be so massive, because, as you said, it stops at the back stops with the authority, right from on top, probably, I wouldn't say presidency, but top government officials, down through the top officials of the GRA, down through to where it ends. At the segment of the outbound. What are we doing? So that once we can put all these things in place, and also the regional integration. let me tell you something, and this is practically true. I was traveling, I think last 2 weeks, and I saw at a place, in fact, after the appropriation bill, I'll go to GRA and inform them. Somebody said something to me. I wasn't having my facts, but thinking about it, they should go and check that even the vehicles that have goods from Ghana to other regions, say rice and other things, with the purpose of transporting the goods to probably neighboring countries, along the road, or on the road, they stop and offload them in Ghana here. And I understand because they intend taking them to probably Burkina Faso and Co. They don't pay taxes. So all that I'm saying is that these problems can easily be solved if all stakeholders are ready to help. So because all of us that are talking, here is the case that a stakeholder does not even know that about 5 billion is not his fault. Probably he doesn't know because it's not captured as part of the data.
Are you sure he doesn't know?
That's why I said probably. I use that adverb. But what I'm trying to say is that this problem can be solved if we have a serious-minded person who is ready to put his life on the line and say that no. Because for something to pass through Ghana's borders and nothing is paid or smuggled out or under invoice, this under invoicing thing, I've been saying this for almost 3 years now. Even when the president, reduced importation tax by 50%, goods and services, and even cars by 30%, people were under invoice. It's something that people know. We should have rather discouraged the under invoicing. So we as even citizens, we as a people should also do our best. Because at the end of the day, it's not His Excellency Nana Dankwa or former President Mahama or anybody that you think you're doing. It's affecting your own children. At the end of the day, it will affect education, or affect health, or affect water, or affect electricity, or affect our roads, and affect us.
Leadership is everything.
Exactly. So I think I'm looking forward to seeing a well-defined or designed framework that contains the entire value chain with all the KPIs, with all the policies, with all the stakeholders. So
let me read just a few messages and then we take a break. We'll return to look at issues from the budget and the appearance in Parliament for 2 days, vetting by Ken Oforiatta. The majority leader claims that Nana Asante Bediatu's secretary had actually written unilaterally to cut the budget for Parliament and the judiciary. Do you believe that? So we will deal with all of that in one pack, looking at the budget. In 2019, the Corruption Watch under the CDD and its partners actually decided to do a check from 2015, 2016, and 2017. And they compared Bank of Ghana data of gold exported for those 3 years. And they came to yet another realization that over 30 billion Ghana cedis worth of gold, had left the shores of Ghana without any official knowledge, quote unquote. How do we end this? And let's be sincere to ourselves as a people that the figures and amounts of money we are talking about here would have resulted in you not being asked to pay what is known as the baller tax. That we can't afford to pay for things we have done using money for COVID-19. This free water, free electricity, we could have paid for it 10 times over, and you will enjoy those things free, and government will not have to complain that there's no money. This message is from Malik. Malik is sending the message from my village in Gambigo. He says that I trust that this is read. Please, this big issue of the gold leakages in the country, it is a cabal. One key solution to get these leakages sealed from the point of mining of the gold. Right from the point of mining of the gold. Once we know what quantity of gold we expect from the mining, there must be a corresponding value in the export. If these two do not correspond, then you know there is a big problem. Another solution is to put in place a task force, since it is an income-making source, and so all the necessary resources needed to protect this enterprise must be done. This is coming from Malik in Gambibugo in the Upper East region. Now, interesting, YK Ansa Yeboah says, Samson, how long have we been talking about Political Parties Act 574, which you have been referring to? We seem oblivious to the solution to our problems when it is indeed not rocket science. Just look at your panelists going round in circles when the solution is not rocket science. All we need is law enforcement. Enforce the law. The political party financing is the biggest issue. They need the money to do it, and they must get it. This one from Elijah Awile says, your panelists are doing very well. It seems they are rather massaging the issue under discussion than I expected. They should be bold and name and shame people in positions, even if I am engaged in any corrupt acts. This will help your listeners to reorient our thinking about corruption. Thank you very much. So those are some of the messages that are coming. I'll take a break and return to share a lot more. Or let me just share this batch of messages and then take a break. This one from Precious Kwame Adade. He says, issue of systems not working effectively. That's the bottom line. Collins Little Tete says, we will do something. We will meet and discuss every day. We will. So when are we going to act? Until every individual feels personally responsible for the careful planning and preservation of our natural resources, the inexorable destruction will go on. Chase says, better nip it in the bud before international community blacklists us. And finally, Kweku Inkumabeku says, where money laundering goes, terrorism follows. That is very serious statement. We'll be right back.
Then it stands to pause that something different must be done. And something different must be done within the remits of our Constitution. And that is why we are resubmitting to find out the kinks. But I think the philosophy of trying to get more equity, trying to leverage our resources, is something that we should all consider and know that it's important for us to transform. And I do not believe that we broke any rules by the way in which the procurement was done. But the question that really that we should debate, I know that in my capacity as a public service official, without being a director but co-owner of that company, I was not part of any decision making with regards to that. But I think we should be having, truly a broader discussion about Ghanaian enterprise, and therefore how independent and experienced entrepreneurs can join government at any point in time. So, Mr. Chairman, here is a company that is 30 years old. Here's a company that started with borrowing $25,000. Here's a company that started I guess, tantamount to a place you would not think an investment bank would start. But that's the resources a Ghanaian entrepreneur had to start that. After 30 years, with 500,000 accounts of Ghanaians, 1 billion cedis under management, offices around the country, having participated in every Eurobond transaction since we started in 2007, are we truly saying that in the event of anybody becoming an attorney general, you can use your law offices? In the event of being a finance minister? I think those are fundamental questions, and therefore, if the rules are clear on what you are talking about, I don't think we should encourage such cynicism because it just goes to poison the environment and we may lose good. I don't think there was any conflict of interest straight away because I was not part of the decision. I think the first-class nature of the institution speaks to itself. I think the Ghanaian entrepreneurial ingenuity that has brought it this far must be praised, and we should be encouraging our companies to grow so that we can begin to do the Eurobonds ourselves.
Joy FM have reported gold export syndicate, and the state is losing money. Their exposition, will you be interested in watching it and take appropriate steps for the recovery of those lost revenues?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I did respond to a question about how we are going to tackle this issue of gold and to really even look at maybe a new model similar to COCOBOD to see whether it will be more effective. So yes, it will be of keen interest to see this. It is foolhardy when you realize that the conditions precedent, the conditions subsequent, and therefore the ability for the concessionaire has a fake transaction in the middle, with the Americans also thinking that we can go through. First of all, let us understand that the transaction had begun before we came into government. The president looked at it. It's really a utility entity, 25-year concession, etc., where literally after you set good rates, profitability is assured. The president did not see any magic wand in which a foreign entity should have 80% of the value and the Ghanaians should have 20. So immediately he moved that to 51 for Ghanaians and 49 for foreigners. There was a clear feeling that the Americans will not support that. He was insistent to do that. So that was right. Then we went on. Yes, I did write a letter in which we were insisting that there should be a special purpose vehicle to hold the Ghanaian shares, because if they held those shares individually, it would have been easy for the foreign company to align with one shareholder, and then the whole basis of maintaining this thing as Ghanaian-led would not happen. There were, I think, 3 companies left, BSC, Meralco, and EDF from France. BSC was disqualified on the basis of non-disclosure. It was a Chinese firm, American money. EDF, I think, was not happy with the Ghanaian dominance of that. And then Meralco turning into BTS had their Ghanaian shareholders. So I'm not sure whether characterizing it as a lost opportunity when you know that you are at the precipice and there's something wrong and you fail to have the courage to be able to pull back to fight another day. I think you can maybe even link it to the issue of the banking crisis where the asset quality reviews were done. It was clear that the banks were going to collapse and there was a lack of resolve in being able to do that. So a certain boldness, and I think government should be praised to know that even at whatever level or whatever time an incident occurs, that will be prejudicial to the protection of our assets.
And that's Ken Ofori-Atta, former finance minister and finance minister designate. He has not been too well, but spent 2 days in Parliament going through the approval process. This is Newsfile, your most authoritative news analysis platform, and it's brought to you by Bank of Africa, strong as a group and close as a partner, MTN everywhere you go. Ashasi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. DuraPlus, where DuraPlus goes, water flows, having mosquito spray and coil, pleasant on humans, tough nightmare on insects. And Upper Foods, it is tasty. DBS Industries and Robert & Sons Limited Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care services provider. Let me welcome Dr. Kwabena Nyako, Dr. Kwabena Nyako Otu, who is Chief Economics and Director, Labor Research and Policy Institute, Trades Union Congress, TUC. Thank you very much for joining us, Doc. You are muted, so I can't hear you. You are muted.
I'm not.
Great. Yeah, okay.
It's from my end. I'm not.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us. So I'll come to you. And gentlemen, we have about an hour to do the rest of the issues we are discussing. So when I come to you, as much as possible, get to the jugular and let's know how we manage the circumstances that we face. So let me start with Ben Boakye. Civil society, including yours, with expertise in these areas, you seem to have a bit of a focus on the Ejapa that government is clear is coming back to Parliament, and appears the finance minister asked to it that is one of the best ways that we can get money to assist our COVID situation. The Imani guys and others I hear say there's only one question we should be asking. What exactly is the motivation? And in the CDD, everybody is saying it's bad, bad, bad. Why can't they forget about it? Then the question is being asked, how much are we giving up and how much are we getting? The answer reveals it is a bad deal. Why are you guys so against it?
That is a very important question you ask, Samson. And I want to say that it is really not about cynicism or being against somebody at the personal level, but it is part of a national conversation on a national asset that is being disposed of, if you like. It is fine to say it's equity, but essentially, what we are seeking to do is to sell a portion of our future receipts on the stock market, hoping to raise money now. So we have to really interrogate the pros and cons with such a decision. And that is essentially what civil society has been doing. And we just published a report really looking at the legal issues how they benefit Ghana, and also on the face of the agreements that we do have, the numbers that have been thrown out in the agreement, how it benefits Ghana. And we are still convinced that this is not a good deal that Ghana should be engaging in. And consistently, when you have asked the finance ministry about, the questions about valuation, the content of the agreement, the answers you get are that we want to do the best for the country. We want to optimize the mineral sector. But for the first part of this conversation, we have exposed that there is bigger money out there that we are not chasing, all right? And for a country, your role, your essential role in mineral governance is your ability to initiate and engineer policy for the sustainability of the industry, and also to ensure that you benefit, you optimize the operation to the benefit of the country. Your solution is not to give up on doing the hard work of ensuring that companies pay the right taxes. You can account for the output of the mineral to ensure that even the royalty that you are collecting is the actual royalty that you're due, as a country. That's the hard part. To take the little or what you think is not enough, to want to go and use that to raise money, you are evading the actual work that requires action. Beyond that, as I mentioned, you engineer policy, right? So the functioning of the mining industry rests on the country. So you are not a businessman, okay, who takes investment decisions, but you take policy decisions. Ghana is the one that can decide that we mine or we do not mine in this country. You can decide that after your 15-year tenure, that's it. In a specific area, we are not mining. So if you engineer an attempt to sell that right, that mandate, that capacity, what makes you a nation, decide to offload that onto the stock market, we have a problem with that. And that is a fundamental issue that we have to discuss, as a people. If you look at the agreement as it has been fashioned, where a Japan transaction says that we are stabilizing the royalty regime, and therefore you cannot review it. And Mr. Tebe is here. I mean, some of the work they have done with the mining companies, even at some point, they had to go to the mining companies and say, we need money upfront, give us money, and then when our due are supposed to be given us, you can take that off. So in the contracts with these mining companies, we have what we call good faith negotiations, which allows either the country or the companies to come to the table and say, this is how the industry is evolving. We need to take these fiscal policy actions to ensure that we sustain the industry, all right? And that is essential, it is critical for the functioning of the industry, not just for the fiscal, not just for the numbers, all right? So you can't lose that and sell that to the stock market and say you can never engage in fiscal negotiations with the company. And what we are seeking to do with this transaction is to lose that reality and say that at all costs, Ghana should take 5% or 3% as has been agreed in the agreements that we have signed with the mining companies. And if you check royalty, the evolution of royalty payments in the mineral industry, countries that really have poor systems, that are not able to check the performance of companies and how they pay their taxes, the capacity of tax authorities to be able to tax appropriately, are the ones who focus more on royalty payments, so that at the barest minimum, you can get some revenue from the extraction of the gold. Because like we did mention earlier, evasion, under declaration, profit shifting, and makes it difficult for countries to tax the mineral sector. Okay. So if you have royalty there at the barest minimum, you can get some money from them. So if you look at the advanced countries like Australia, South Africa, Canada, they are moving away from even the royalty system because they have the system to tax and tax appropriately, and also raise money from the value chain. So they have built competencies where you are more concerned about how many Ghanaians are participating in the sector, how much goods are we contributing to the industry, because the value chain really is where the money is, all right? The goods that you are producing, the supply of electricity, the production of inputs into the mining. So if a mining company tells you that we spent 2 billion out of 3 billion on cost, you know that the cost that they are talking about was absorbed by your own companies, your own businesses. So you are not even worried at that level, But because we are not at that level of development, we tend to rely on royalty. But when you have been able to build the local capacity and systems to be able to tax along the value chain, your focus is not at the upstream taxation and royalty. And that's where you can decide to rather go aggressive on investment attraction, lower fiscals, and then ensure that you can make more money along the value chain. But this contract, this agreement that we are ceding to Ejapa ensures that we are not able to do that into the future, because you are locking the fiscal regime. That takes away the flexibility, what makes you a nation, and you are selling that onto the stock market. And the stock market says, no, you cannot touch the fiscal regime, because we have agreed that for this period that is undefined, we have to make our 5% from the royalties that we are selling to the board. So our problem really is that look beyond your expertise in finance, look beyond your expertise on fiscal issues, and look at how the industry functions and how countries optimize the industry. And then you appreciate that it's not just about financing, it's not just about raising money, but there are specific context issues in the mining industry that you have to pay attention to, all right? The distinctiveness of a nation's royalty that you have to pay attention to. It is not the same as any royalty company that operates and an agreement with companies. And I think that is another area that the public is much more confused, because they tell you that we have companies like Franco-Nevada and big royalty companies out there. But here it is. What these companies do is that they go into an agreement, for example, with Newmont, and say, we want to finance your operations. And in return, you give us a portion of your output, right, when you have produced the gold. What that means is that they are only tied their investment to the operations of the mine or the mining company, and not to the resources institute. All right. So when Newmont collapses or any other company collapses, the royalty company loses their money. So it's a different arrangement.
All right.
And the state has nothing to do with that. But what we are doing with Ejapa is to actually give the geographical coordinates of areas in our country and say that as long as gold can commercially be extracted in those areas, somebody who is giving us just $500 million or $1 billion, if you like, has perpetual interest in those areas that we are assigning to the agreement. And that is really difficult for anybody who understands the resource governance and the mineral sector to appreciate this kind of
now Ben,
and that is really the conversation we want to push to government, and not just about we are doing something new that hasn't been done. There is nothing new about it.
Ben.
If you look at the fiscal issues, it is money you want to give to Ejapa.
Thank you.
Our industries.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Ben. Now, Ben, before you take leave of us, I want your comments briefly in 2 minutes on what happened, which led the Speaker of Parliament, Abang Bagbin, to issue a caution and actually a threat to the executive about the approval of the budget. We have now been informed that by the majority leader and leader of government business, Osei Mensah Bonsu, that it took the president's secretary, Nana Asante Betio, to unilaterally do that slashing of Parliament's budget by 119 million, and then that of the judiciary by 77 million Ghana cedis. Now, that has been reversed, so they are happy. Do you believe that story?
I mean, it's not really about believing it or not. I think I'm even much more worried beyond that, where the president's secretary writes and the president says, I'm not aware, or somebody says the president was not aware. And that fundamentally raises some significant questions about the many letters that have been coming from the president's secretary. Which one do we believe and which one do we know? And much of the work we have done, really, that are contentious, and we've got a flag for it from government, most of them bear the signature of the executive secretary. So which one was the president aware and which one was he not aware? You're talking about Ameri, you're talking about Ejapa, you are talking about the transfer of the aggregator role of gas from GMPC to Ghana Gas. These are significant contentious issues that has implication for the fiscal situation of Ghana, and all of them bear the signature of the executive secretary. So the fundamental question is that when we are rolling back and tracking these letters, which ones can we say that the president indeed knew about those letters, and which one did he know? And I think that is where it becomes important for us to interrogate what has happened in the past and trying to unveil these specifics to see which ones perhaps we could roll back and reverse if the president indeed was not aware and it was just the executive secretary writing on them.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time. Ben Bocce is with the Africa Center for Energy Policy, ACEP. Thank you so very much for your time this morning. Now, let's get to the TUC. And Mr. Tekwe and Theo Champong, I will come to you shortly, and also Dr. Stephen Amwa. Now, the TUC, you were not happy at all about the comments that were made last week by the technical advisor at the Ministry of Finance, Dr. Samuel Ni Noi Ashong, that government cannot offer huge salary increases to the public sector workers for the next, few years. And, Stephen was here and said government hadn't said anything, so we shouldn't take that as gospel. Now, President Akufo-Addo says that government is not freezing salary hikes for public sector workers for the next 4 years. He says that COVID-19 resulted in a drastic shutdown in economic activities and a huge drop in domestic revenue, combined with a sharp and unparalleled hike in COVID-19 related expenditure, among other things. Nonetheless, he assures that it is not what you have heard. Let's have your reaction now. Hello, Dr. Nyankwo-Otu.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you for having the TUC. First of all, when I read the synopsis you sent for this program, and when I read all the media accounts of what Dr. Ni Ashon is purportedly said about wage freeze, I actually don't find him making a categorical statement about freezing wages. I mean, his point is that we should not expect huge wage increases. And I'm not too sure that in this country we have had huge wage increases even in the past. So given the levels of wages in Ghana, if you increase it by 10%, that cannot be described as huge wage increase. So his point is not exactly to say that we are freezing wages. He says you should not expect huge wage increases, but I don't know why he says that. Also because we've never had huge wage increases in the past. We have been having 10%, 11%, and that cannot be described as huge wage increases for public sector workers, especially when you compare with what other workers in the public sector get. So that's the first point. The second point is that, and I mentioned this on another program, that even if there was suggestion of a wage freeze, we could conveniently ignore that in the sense that there's always an appropriate forum, the public sector standing joint, where wages are determined, where we agree with governments, and if it's the minimum wage, with employers as well, whether to increase the wage and by what percentage we do increase the wage or we do not increase. And for us, until that appropriate forum is convened and negotiations start, and we come to a certain conclusion that, okay, for one reason or the other, we are not able to increase wage. Until that is done, those statements can be treated as sideshows, and really, we were not too concerned about it. We can ignore them.
Yeah, so now your members can be assured, listening to you, that there's no cause for panic. and that when the right time comes, you will make the necessary representation at the tripartite and so on. How concerned are you about the number of taxes, and how are you looking at that going into the possible, salary, issues as in negotiations?
Okay, but before I talk about taxes, I think we as Labour were also assured by the president that he has not frozen wages. That's a good assurance. But at the same time, when I look through the budget, I really do not find the figures that support a possible wage increase. I really do not find the figures. But as I've indicated, whatever be the case, we need to go to the appropriate forum to discuss whether there is a wage increase or not.
Well, if you can't find it in the budget, then it tells you the story. There will not be wage increase.
So your point about appropriate time, I mean, that appropriate time legally is passed, because by the Public Finance Act, engineered by my comrade here, Mr. Tepe, he's a comrade. By that act, we should have done that in April 2020. We should have determined the public sector wage in April. But of course, we know that in April 2020, it was practically impossible to even convene tripartite or the standing joint. Okay. So that time is past. But I'm also aware that before the budget was read, government actually had contacts and engagement with the unions, particularly the unions in the public sector, the public sector. And I'm aware that somehow we all agreed that, okay, let the budget go. Of course, we didn't know that there are no intended increases in the budget. But as I've indicated, when I look at the figures, I don't find such increases. But on the question of the taxes, I think that's also where the challenge comes. On another network, I indicated that we see when COVID hit, the three main sectors of the economy, government sector, the firms and households, were all badly hit. But government, be government with other levers, having the ability to borrow and all that, managed to bail out households and some sections of businesses. And that was right. It was proper. That when citizens, when households, when firms got hit by a pandemic beyond their own, what they could do to recover, it is right for government to come to their aid. Now, if you fast forward it to 2021, and government now says that you are now going to pay tax, the assumption then is that, okay, the households and businesses have recovered. They are now making money, and they are now in a position to contribute in the form of a higher tax. I think that kind of assumption is wrong. Households and businesses are still struggling. Across all sectors, those that lost their job, many have not been recorded. Those that got a pay cut, 50% pay cut across all sectors, they are still enjoying or they are still suffering from that 50% pay cut. So it is not really right, an assumption to make that households and firms have recovered and that the only sector that has not recovered is government. And for that matter, households should now pay tax to support government. That assumption is wrong. But be they as it is, even if we have to pay tax, we should look at the nature of the taxes that we are being asked to pay. Essentially, petroleum tax, which is very regressive. What then it means is that we are punishing the very poor who are still under the COVID weather. Okay. We could have looked at other tax avenues, other avenues for taxation. And in your first segment, I listened to the many, many tax leakages and the exemptions that allow for some of these leakages. So again, on another network, I indicate that if you take 2017, one of the principal objectives of government was to reduce tax exemption, the amount we lose to tax exemptions. Unfortunately, in 2017, tax exemptions alone was about 5.2 billion Ghana cedis, which was 40% more than the amount used to fund free SHS from 2017 to 2019. So really, government needs revenue to plug the fiscal hole, but we need a conversation as to how we generate that kind of revenue. The idea that firms and households can accommodate extra regressive taxation for us is not correct.
Yes, so finally, what's going to be the way out? Because your expectation, from what I hear from you, but for the taxes, you may have been willing to say, yes, we understand this is covered, therefore we can bear without any, wage increase. But having, brought on the taxes increases or new taxes, then commensurately, correspondingly, there ought to be wage increase. The time that should have been done, the discussion should have been had, has long elapsed. The budget doesn't give a clue. As you say, it is not in there that there will be wage increase. What is going to happen?
So, first of all, even without the taxes, the expectation is that wages will go up. Of course, we realize that because of COVID, inflation actually rose beyond what was projected. And there are various reports of price increases across board. So workers expectantly were looking for a wage increase. Now, if you don't find that wage increase in the budget, but on top of it, you find these taxes, then you actually make our situation worse. What will happen is that we take the president's word for what it is, that he has not frozen wages. And we expect that in the not too distant, in the course of this month or the coming month, the various forums will be convened. The public sector standing joint will be convened. And also the tripartite will be convened for a major discussion on these issues. But ultimately, we expect that given all that has happened to workers and to businesses, we expect a wage increase for 2021 and beyond.
All right. Dr. Kwabena Nyakon Otu, Chief Economist and Director, Labor Research and Policy Institute, Trades Union Congress. Thank you very much for your time on Newsfile.
Thank you.
Great. Now, let's get back, and I have Dr. Theo Champong and Mr. Seth Tekpe still on Zoom with me. Thank you all so very much for your patience. Let me start with you, Theo. The Finance Minister's performance in the House over the last 2 days. What's your verdict? There are people who say he didn't give them as much as they expected. I don't know what you think.
I think he gave a fair account and, also painted a picture of the difficult challenges that lay ahead for the country in terms of fiscal space, and the big issue being how do we raise more taxes without necessarily having a disproportionate or an unequal impact on other segments of the society. That is the big challenge going forward that we need to address as a nation. So for me, in terms of his performance, it is what it is, and I expect that he will be passed. But the substantive issues that he raised, some of which are to do with like Ijapa and Ben very well eloquently explained the issues from the perspective of the resource governance, and the wider issue of taxation of people, in the Ghanaian economy. So firms and households, and the extent that you want to support the post-COVID economic recovery agenda going forward. So that's where maybe if I have a minute or two, I can kind of give you my thoughts on what I think
please go on. Please go on.
Could be done going forward along those lines.
Yes, go on.
Yeah, so in one breath, like Dr. Otu was saying, government clearly has supported industry with some targeted tax support initiatives for SMEs in this budget. So there's like a 9-month deferment on the payment of some taxes, including corporate income tax. Although even with that one, you need to be in a profit-paying position.
Your line is muted. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, my apologies.
Great, go on.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Yes. So I was just saying that in one breath, we're seeing government imposing these new taxes, although, yes, they have also supported some SMEs, those in the hospitality and the services sector, with some tax deferrals. So, for example, there's an extension of the payment of corporate income tax for 9 months for this year. Although even that, you need to be in a tax-paying position before you can actually pay corporate income tax in the first place. But these new measures that have been imposed, as Dr. Otu has said, for me, they are disproportionate, they are unequal, and it shows that the tax burden in this country actually is not evenly shared amongst the different segments of the population. I also teach tax a bit, and Mr. Tepe will tell you a couple of the key principles of taxation is efficiency and tax neutrality. And when you look at a lot of the new taxes that for me have been imposed, the deadweight loss is that big. So at the end of the day, what you don't want to do is to distort the economic decisions of individuals and firms, because they really are the key to sustaining the economy, even beyond government policy or government action. And these new taxes that are being imposed would tend to have that disproportionate impact, on them, especially like the consumptions-related taxes. And you also see that when you go further down the food chain in Ghana, a lot of fuel or energy is a key component in the productive or primary process in the country. So anytime you impose a tax on energy-related taxes, it tends to actually drive up inflation as well, which tends to deepen inequality if you don't have any compensatory effect or a compensatory policy action by the government. So clearly for me, a number of the taxes, and I stated this last week, I think they are regressive. I think in the middle of an economic recovery that you want to support firms and individuals, that is not when we actually go to impose some of these taxes. And there are other avenues to plug the gap or the loophole. We've discussed some of them, but I know tax exemptions is a big thing in Ghana. We've been talking about this since 2015-16. There's meant to be a tax exemptions bill before the House that needs to be passed. And I think urgently we actually need to work on that. In the petroleum sector, we are losing $1.9 billion every year, through tax evasion. Tax exemptions itself is costing this country around 2% or $1.34 billion, right? More than enough to fund free SHS and to build a couple of roads and hospital infrastructure. So really, the emphasis, I would think, going forward should be more on closing the loopholes, closing the gaps, loopholes around exemptions. There need to be clear policy guidance and action on which industry gets what exemptions. For the life of me, I could not understand why, for example, somebody building a hotel around the airport area should be given a tax exemption, right? Or for some of the concession agreements that we do sign, we give tax exemptions that are even more than the initial investment that is being put in. These are very serious issues that we need to consider. And then lastly, the wastage in the delivery of government projects. You look at the data and you see that governments are building schools or facilities that are costing sometimes 3-4 times more than what other private individuals are are doing for the same school building and facility. It's a question of inefficiency. It's a question of the lack of standardization. And we can, again, do quite a lot of work in there. And when you look at the aggregate effect of plugging these loopholes and gaps, if we are really serious about it, then it means we actually wouldn't even need to go and impose some of these regressive consumption-related taxes.
Okay. Thank you so very much, Dr. Theo Echampong, for joining us once again from his base in the United Kingdom. Once again, as always, this show is brought to you by Bank of Africa Strong as a group and close as a partner, MTN everywhere you go. Ashesi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Duraflux, where Duraflux goes, water flows. Having mosquito spray and coil. Pleasant on humans, tough nightmare on insects. And Napa Foods, it's tasty. DBS Industries and Robert & Sons Limited Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care services provider. I take a quick break and come to finish up with the Honorable Sir Tekpe and Dr. Amwa here in the studio. Now, and when I return, Mr. Tekpe, there is one gentleman who says he wants the media to subject the budget to a certain perspective. He says he doesn't seem to see a clear visionary leadership in the budget, and that should be our concern. So he asked the question, do you see a clear visionary leadership provided by this budget? Given the development chasm between Ghana and the West, I am of the firm belief that every budget must be a mini Marshall Plan for Ghana, with the aim of making this country a developed nation. The reason there are so many agitations about line items in the budget is that people don't see any vision behind the budget. There is lack of bold visionary leadership personified in the budget. People are generally concerned about their future and the future of their families. If people can't see their lives improving over the long term as a result of the policies in the budget, they might as well demand whatever they can get now within the budget period. So I return, and then you start on that note with us, and then the concerns of labor in the present circumstance. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. Now, as I go to Mr. Seth Tekpe, I'd like to say happy birthday to Haruna Mama, who clocks 70 years today. And this is coming from your children and your family and from your wife, Ambassador Irene Mama. Thank you so much, senior citizen. We know that you are always locked on Newsfile. You never miss Newsfile for anything. We wish you good health. Thank you. Now, Mr. Tekwe, the message I had read to you first about not locating a vision in the budget came from Kweku Entry Buesiakon, and he says that's the way we should look at the budget. If you took that and you took the concerns of labor, what would be your approach to commenting about the budget?
Thank you very much, Samson. Permit me to share just 4 graphs to put things in context. I'm not sure I'm getting it. Oh, the host has disabled it. Okay, I don't know if they can help.
It will come on. It will come on.
You know, yeah, I understand the host has disabled the sharing.
We are working on it. It was a mistake. We are working on it.
Yeah, okay, but let me continue. Just I know we have limited time. First of all, the first thing that yes, I mean the one can say that the government has an objective, and that is to reach 5%, but it's very difficult to see how that can be achieved, given that revenues are flat, and GRA and the entire revenue machinery is not expected to raise, from the government numbers, it's not expected to raise 17%, let alone the 20% plus, and at the point I heard the minister designate talk about doubling 14% to 28%. That's impossible. It cannot be done. Whilst revenues are stagnant and have been stagnant, we don't see a reduction in expenditure. And in an austerity situation like this, especially post-COVID, it is important that, when you are doing austerity, you are doing it for both revenue and expenditure. And that is our experience, whether we do it on our own or we do it in conjunction with the IMF, as we have often done in the past. So I think that is. Then we don't see debt. Debt is a major headache, and then in the context is a major headache, and this has been happening since 2017, when the decline in debt started to reverse. Then finally, yes, to put the labor concern. One, there's a breach of the law. Secondly, and there are breaches of many laws. If we have time, we can go through some of them. Including this is a clear breach of PFMA. Two, PFMA is clear that if you cannot reach agreement in April, there's a formula which you must follow, which would have made a provision, based on the previous year's negotiation. For Mr. Otu to say that they haven't seen it, I think that is the issue, which we do have. Sorry, I have the wrong, but I think one of the things that struck me most is the fact that the minister continues to, talk about taking the fiscal situation from a certain position and improving it. When in actual fact, it's not true. It's not true at all, because you can see, for example, debt was 57% and now it's close to 80%. The deficit was 6.1%, by the way, not 10.3% at the end of 2016. And we are currently at 13%. Some even speculate that it could be 15%. And so this is serious deterioration. In recent times, COVID notwithstanding, and I've made a point that one of the things that we need to be government needs to be candid is what is attributable to COVID and what is not attributable to COVID. You can see from this that the peak we reached in tax and revenue in the yellow
you take the rest of it.
Was in 20. Sorry, this is the. Was in 2015 actually, and since then we have never, come close to, 17%. So how you could get 20%, is a problem. And then this is the picture going forward, and this is the point I was making. Picture going forward, there is the revenue performance. There's no support, the fact that we could be out of the woods because the performance is stagnant. That's why what we have been told, GRA moving to 20%, and I take. The MTEF, from the 2020 budget and from 2021, and I just position them, and you can see the numbers at the top, which is total revenue, and the numbers that are, follow it, that is tax revenue, and we are nowhere near raising that amount of revenue. And this is a graph. You can see it clearly. Pictures are worth 1,000 words. Then I spoke about expenditure, and again, you can see that expenditure has been above 23%, 20%, from 2017. By the way, there was an offset. You can see the 2.3. So if you deduct that, 2016 is 20%. And currently, in fact, later, as you will see, it shot up to about 23%. In fact, from 2020 budget before COVID issues and came in, the adjustment that was made was 25%. and it has remained 25%. So compared to the revenue situation, you can see, that expenditures are still high, and they are going to be high all the way to the 2024. There's an indication of that in the MTF, in the budget. So this is what probably is being said. And this shows, again, in the graph, you can see not much. And you can see the spike. You can see that in 2020 budget, original budget, there was an indication that, we were consolidating. Then we came to the media review, and because of adjustments for interest, adjustments for wages, and adjustment for energy rose, we saw a spike. And this shows in a very big increase. This is the problem that faces us. Your blue is compensation or wages, and your yellow, is the that is like the sea. The yellow, the waves. The yellow is interest. When you add the two, you see the first straight line. That is our tax revenue. It's not able to cover it. You can see that it was when we had a single spine that we had this situation.
Okay.
Control.
Yeah, Mr.
You can see from today that it has just been
Mr. Tekwe, I'm sorry.
It's not until 2023 that we are expected.
Right, I'm sorry, but we have run out of time. It's only fair that I give Steve the next 4 minutes or so that he can also give a reaction. Thank you very much, Mr. Tekwe. Thank you so much for all the time. And Steve, thank you for being so patient. So now let's hear from you.
I'm in trouble.
You wanted to react to Dr. Theo Champong and then make a presentation. So in the next 5 minutes, let's hear you.
But it's unfortunate for me about five
It's unfortunate. Issues. It's unfortunate. So let's hear you.
Quick one. I think one of the doctors who spoke said that anytime you increase taxes, you increase inflation. Or inflation. I don't think that is necessarily entirely true. It depends on the cost of the inflationary rate. Either it is cost push or demand pull. Because we even use that to target inflation sometimes to reduce it, especially if it is demand pull. So I think we need to correct that thing. And then quickly, I want to come back to Ejapa and move quick. I think Ejapa, the decision is backed by law. The Minerals Income and Investment Fund Act 2018, Act 978, gives that chance. And I think time and time the minister explained the fact that, of course, it is one of the best policies in the short term to ensure, and even long term, to ensure that we add value to our royalties. And so far, none of those who are speaking about this has been able to point one illegality or mistakes in what has been done. But what I agree is that, of course, as stakeholders, we want to make input, we want to understand it more, and that is not a problem. But for people who are saying it is fictitious, it is this, they have not been able to point one illegality in it. Time may not allow us. But going back to what Mr. Tucker said, I am quite surprised because I'm sure he knows, but if he doesn't know, the time we find ourselves in, from the PFM Act, Public Financial Administrative Act 2016, Act 921, Section 18 states clearly that when you have a public health pandemic situation or epidemic such as this, even our fiscal rules and targets are suspended. When you have it like this, so we have COVID economy and pre-COVID economy. And the pre-COVID economy indicates strongly that the performance of the economy under Nana Danko Akufo-Addo's government, the MPP government, is far better than we inherited in 2016. Most of the critical primary macro indicators, such as inflation rate, 15.4, we're having single digit, talking about even government's own policy rate, 25.5. Now we are moving around, even now, we are having about 14%. Lending rate was way over 30%. We are having about 22, 25%. Talking about even fiscal deficit, we're doing less than 5%. And we had a threshold of 5%. So if you look at the figures, and we are doing trend analysis, it is extremely far better. But coming back to the taxation, they increase taxes, introduce or impose 10 different tax components, from the Financial Services Act, the pharmaceuticals, and all those taxes, even the real estate. Under our regime, we have either reduced or entirely scrapped 15 components of them. So if you are talking about net increase or decrease, we have done even far better. But when you have a situation such as this, expansionary fiscal policies whose ramifications takes about 2 years will not work. Tactically, will not. So we should understand the fact that the timing that we are in, nobody can analyze the situation in the everyday or the conventional context that we do. But even having said that, the economy that we find ourselves in today, if you look at where we are heading towards, there is hope because we can consolidate. There is hope because we are trying to continue. There is hope because we are going to complete. And the signs are clearly there, and we see what is happening.
Okay.
It's very unfortunate that maybe each of them...
That's a very good note on which...
we will not have time to go through, but
so
at least it is not
Dr.
a dying situation as people are painting.
Thank you very much, Dr. Stephen Amoah. And I need to remind all of you that Love FM's Kiddie Quiz grand finale in Kumasi is today in the next 1 hour. So you join on the Joy Learning channel and Love FM in Kumasi as we have Matthias of Uganda, Santasi, and Divine Mission Academy, Longhorns, okay, yes, in your constituency, Longhorns in the grand finale today. I want to say thank you so very much, Benjamin Boache, Executive Director, Africa Center for Energy Policy, ASEP, Dr. Theo Champong, economist and political risk analyst, Dr. Stephen Amoah, MP in Shaiso and former CEO, Microfinance and Small Loans Center, Maslow. Seth Tekpe, Emmanuel Tekpe, is former finance minister, consultant and executive director, PFM Tax Africa Network. Dr. Kwabna Nyako Otu is chief economist and director, Labor Research and Policy Institute, Trades Union Congress. Thank you all so much for joining us. And we also had Henry Osei, Director of Research of the Chamber of Bullion Traders Ghana, join us. I'm Samson Ladi Anyanini. Have a good afternoon. God willing, next week we come your way with another edition of Newsfile.
Thank you.